A couple of points that I think need to be made. These are very, I think, vitally important for how we approach the challenges we face. I think just shipping more weapons into Ukraine is going to make things worse. I think trying our hardest to bring peace between Ukraine and Russia is that type of approach is going to do much more in the long term and even the short term for the people of Ukraine and the people of Russia. Neither one of those countries is going to succeed as long as there is violence and force and that type of activity going on right there. And both of them depend on each other's economic interaction in order to be prosperous. And so I would hope that we do not focus on supposed military solution, because there will be no military solution. It just won't happen. Russia is too big and too close and too strong militarily for Ukraine to make that difference. So what we have to do is find a way for a compromise where they can actually end these hostilities. That should be, as far as I'm concerned, our number one goal, is to bring peace to that area. I was upset. And does Belarus still not have a U.S. ambassador? Belarus, does it still not have a U.S. ambassador?
No, sir. It's a permanent chargé.
Okay, so here we are, the country Minsk, where we have a major agreements have been negotiated, and the president of Belarus, is the old line commie himself, has tried to play a positive role. We have the Minsk agreement as a basis for some sort of compromise to go on, and yet we can't even have an ambassador in Belarus for some unrelenting hostility that Russia is facing right now. When I went to Belarus, were you with me, Gregory, on that? We got there and we said, well, why don't we have one? And they said, well, because of the political prisoners. Oh, I go, man, they must have 50, 60, 100 political prisoners here. They had six political prisoners. Two of them were members of the Young Anarchist League who'd thrown bottles filled with gasoline at some embassy. No, there's something wrong here. And I think that what we have is, after the fall of communism in Russia, things, for whatever happened, whatever reason, over the years, instead of trying to help Russia become part of Western Europe and part of our whole economic scene, we started looking at them again as the evil empire, which I have to admit that Ronald Reagan used that line. That's as far as I'll go. But the fact is that what you need to do if we're going to have peace is to stop going with that belligerent attitude and try to find solutions. And I sure hope, there's some things that have been, anyway, I sure hope that's what the emphasis that we have. And I know that today in this panel, that I've recognized a positive spirit, okay? And I think that's what we have today, and I thank you for it. Let me just note, when Russia was down and out, and the economic crisis that they went through because of because they were transferring over to a market economy, during that time we had our own American oligarchs in Russia siphoning wealth out of that society. Our government was pumping billions of dollars in there, but for every $1 billion we pumped in, we had our own guys and bankers from the West taking wealth out of that society. And some of those by the way, some of those American businessmen who were over there making billions off their chaos didn't even pay taxes over there, and then didn't pay taxes over here either. So there's a lot of misdeeds that have been going on in the private sector as well as in government policy that have led us to this. One, and let me just note, the people who put the most pressure on the Ukrainian government in terms of how they would meet their economic crisis was not Russia. I mean, Yanukovych went to a EU and asked for a deal. They were in an economic crisis. The EU offered them that much. They went to Russia and said, what about you? And Russia said, oh no, we really want you. And I've read the two offers, and there's no doubt about it that the reason Yanukovych decided to go with the Russian offer is it was a better offer. And then instead, instead of saying, okay, it's not in our interest to have that economy go away from Europe, that economy should be going toward Europe, which is a legitimate thing. You have to wait until the next election to get somebody, but instead, we colluded with those who, and there was no peaceful replacement of Yanukovych. Yanukovych was taken out of power by brute force. 43 policemen were killed. Now there's 108, you hear about the figure of 100 and something people killed in the square there, Medin. Yeah, 43 of them were policemen who had been shot. This was a violent overthrow of a democratically elected government. And again, let me note, I have no doubt that had we waited for the election, Yanukovych would have been kicked out by the voters. So we bear a lot of, as far as I'm concerned, the burden of responsibility of bringing peace back to that society, because we, through that action, we have created a very violent, chaotic situation in that country. I would say that we have here, China is the largest trading partner in Central Asia. I think that should be of more concern to us than anything else, except that and radical Islam's penetration into Central Asia. Those better be priorities for us. There's the threat. I do not see the Russian army invading Western Europe, so we're spending billions of dollars more to prevent that. And I'd have no, does anyone in the panel think that Russia is prepared to invade Western Europe? I don't think so. I don't, and if you, please let me know afterwards. We'll put your, whatever disclosure you have on that in the record of this. But look, there is a great threat, as we have heard today, of that radical Islam of penetrating Central Asia. And if Central Asia is penetrated by radical Islam, this is going to be a far different world for all of us. And we should, again, be recommending not excluding Russia, because as we say, Russia is part of their economy, but us getting involved and in a cooperative spirit, building a new economic order, so to speak, in Central Asia that's tied to the rest of the world, the Western world. So with those thoughts, I think it's kind of interesting that we are having this hearing at a time when on the floor they are debating the Russian sanctions bill. And so let me just say that I will actually be voting for that bill. So I wanted to be on the record. I can't be there for the debate, and I'll tell you why. I disagree with the sanctions, with the sanctions aimed at Russia. But I'm used to, when you're in a democratic process like this, and Mr. Meeks and I know this full well, you got to compromise. If somebody, I believe in 2/3 of that bill. You know, I believe in that we ought to have sanctions against Iran and North Korea. So I'll go along because I think 2/3 of it's right. And anyway, that's why I'm voting that. A couple of other things about, well, let me just say, I don't think that we can only think in terms of the Ukrainian attachment now to Europe. We need to actually bring Ukraine and Russia into this whole, into an economic, not cooperation, but interaction with the rest of the world and Europe. So with that said, I'm trying to think if there's one other point I'd like to make, but I want to thank all of you. Okay, goal and sharing, okay, peace and cooperation, I covered that. Anti-corruption, one note about anti-corruption. I think this idea that we're trying to pressure people to have a court, an anti-corruption court, is if they want our help in Ukraine, they need to have an anti-corruption court, because that is one of the major things that, it hasn't just brought down this government's ability to function, it has brought down all of the governments of Ukraine since the fall of communism, have been basically undermined by the corruption of the top people in the government. So I think that focusing on that rather than focusing on trying to send them weapons so they can fight harder in this conflict is counterproductive. With that said, thank you all very much.